That's a big one.
That is a big one.
Have you ever wanted a podcast that did it all? Sports, politics, world events. Well, you have come to the right place, because you are listening to C&C Talks.
Hello, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
And welcome back to the C&C Talks podcast. This is episode 29 of our second season as we come down the home stretch of 2023.
Yeah, but just a reminder, as we do every week, we release every Wednesday, and we talk about politics, world events, and sports. It's currently Tuesday, September 12th, 2023, at about 8 p.m. Pacific time.
And we have a really packed show today. We'll be talking about a big scandal involving Elon Musk, talking about an upcoming government shutdown, talk about some new legal news, talking about what's happened in Morocco and Libya. I'll talk, obviously, at some NFL, some college football, more sports. But, Charlie, let's start with this week is the 22nd anniversary of 9/11. And I just want to get your quick thoughts.
Yeah, and that was a day that really challenged American institutions. It was a day that really made everyone think about what this country stood for. And you really have to consider all the bad things that we see going on across the U.S. today pale in comparison to what happened on that day. And we got through that so we can get through whatever comes next.
Yeah, I think that is well put. And I think that one of the things that was so important about 9/11 is how unified the country was in their response to that. And I don't necessarily think that that's where the country is right now, but I think that really that is just so important to get through all of the challenges that we're facing today, Charlie.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk, Charlie, about Elon Musk and Starlink, which is this satellite thing to do with SpaceX that Elon Musk owns, created, I guess. And Ukraine has been using Starlink. And Charlie, it was not put to good use, let's say, by Musk, not by Ukraine, by Musk. He used it to thwart a Ukrainian sneak attack on, I believe, a Russian naval ship in the Black Sea. He turned it off, which means that the drones that they were using lost communication, Charlie. This feels very wrong.
Yes, it certainly does. We still need to look into exactly why this happened. But of course, Elon Musk in another scandal yet again, which he just cannot stay out of controversy, can he?
No, he cannot. And Charlie, I also think that it's pretty important to point out the United States Defense Department pays to use Starlink too, right? And he is actively using it to hurt one of our allies and help one of our adversaries, right? So why are we still paying him to use this product when it's not reliable because he could use it against us at any moment?
Yeah, that is certainly a concern, and I do hope that the U.S. does look into the possible security risks of that.
Yes. Do you think maybe do you agree that they should look for other options in general besides Starlink? Or do you think that this is critical infrastructure for the military?
Well, I think if the military does look into this and they deem that the technology is still usable, still viable, and there's no security risk, then I do not see a reason for the U.S. to move on. If there is, of course, security reasons to not continue using that system, then I would suggest moving on to it. Of course, if a better technology arises, I can imagine the U.S. would want to switch over, but Starlink is one of the best options available in that field.
Yeah, there's just the question, of course, of is Musk going to use it to thwart potential United States military operations like he did to thwart the Ukrainian operation. His reason for doing this was that he thought that the action was going to cause a major escalation in the war. But I would argue that even if he actually did think that and wasn't just doing it because he's friendly with Putin, even in that case, like, so what? There's already a pretty big war going on here.
Yeah, and that's a very good point there. There already is a war going on. It is already escalating. So the idea that not having this these drones be launched that could possibly assist in ending the war sooner with a favorable outcome for the United States just does not make any sense as an argument for the U.S. again to continue using this. But as I said, if there is no security risk found, then I don't believe that there is a reason to move on, other than the fact that Musk may indeed use that in the future. But of course, that is just speculation. Moving on now. The countdown to the government shutdown continues now that Congress is back in session yet again. I believe they have 11 days to get something passed. Of course, there was an agreement between Biden and Kevin McCarthy earlier this year on a plan that has not yet gone through. In fact, Biden is about to face an impeachment inquiry by McCarthy because the Freedom Caucus forced McCarthy's hand by essentially saying either you begin to impeach Biden or we will remove you as Speaker of the House. So, Colin, can we get a little bit more on both the government shutdown and why McCarthy's hand was forced to try to impeach Biden by the Freedom Caucus?
Yeah, so you're mostly correct about this. That Biden-McCarthy deal, that was actually a pretty important deal and probably fairly favorable to Biden, and that was, of course, regarding the debt ceiling. And we'll see if he can reach a similar deal on the budget. And it's important to remember these are two separate issues: the debt ceiling and the budget. The budget has to be passed by September 30th, which is 18 days away. But Charlie, like you said, it's only 11 working days for Congress, 11 business days. They could add more time, but something tells me that Congress is not too keen on doing that. So we'll see if they're able to put together a budget. McCarthy still hasn't proposed much of a budget plan, so it seems hard to believe that they'll get a budget done. So the other possible option is a continuing resolution, which is like a short-term funding option that generally uses the previous year's budget, though it doesn't have to. And so that's a possibility. Question, though, is whether the Freedom Caucus will even be willing to do that, or do they just want a shutdown at this point? Because at the moment, the Freedom Caucus is demanding that in order for a continuing resolution to be passed, it'll need some of the things that they want in it, so not the same as last year's budget. And Charlie, I just don't see a way that a new budget is passed before September 30th. It would seem to me like they're going to need a continuing resolution. We'll see if the Freedom Caucus allows that.
Yes, and of course we will have more news on that as soon as we get it, maybe on next week's show, possibly the week after that, as the events continue.
Now, this is a big story, Charlie, right? Government shutdowns have wide implications. There's whole parts of the government that just cease to function, like generally national parks are closed during government shutdowns. Lots of federal employees are either furloughed or work without pay while the government is shut down. And while a lot of federal employees, that's fine. Like, there are federal employees, Charlie, who live paycheck to paycheck, right?
Yeah,
so if the government is shut down for an extended period of time, that can have some really negative implications on those people.
Absolutely, and that always is interesting to think about government employees working paycheck to paycheck. But yes, moving on now, one of the leaders of the group, the Proud Boys, has been sentenced to 22 years in his connection to January 6th. He was not actually at January 6th, but he certainly helped with the orchestration and his group's involvement in January 6th. Colin, can we get a little bit more on that?
Yes, this is Enrique Tarrio, as I believe how you say his name. I apologize if I buffered that name, but he's sentenced to 22 years in prison. The feds were asking for 32 years in prison. Guidelines actually say that he could have gotten even more than that. The judge only ruled that he got 22 years. We'll see if the United States government decides to potentially appeal that ruling or not. But Charlie, this is one of the big ones. This is, I believe, the biggest sentence that we've seen so far in connection to January 6th. This is on the charges of seditious conspiracy that he and some of the other top people in the Proud Boys were charged with. So it is good to see that accountability is finally taking place.
Yes. And we also have some news on Peter Navarro. If you remember, we did an episode about him in season 1. And now we have a little bit of an update on him, Colin.
Yeah, not necessarily a great update for Mr. Navarro. Things are not going well for him. You might remember during the January 6th committee, there's a whole feud between him and the committee about whether he would comply with his subpoena, as of course you're legally required to do. You have to comply with subpoenas. That's kind of the nature of subpoenas. And Navarro, who is a former Trump administration official, he basically just said, no, I'm not going to do that. So the January 6th committee referred him to the Department of Justice for contempt of Congress. They indicted him, and now his trial has been held, and he has been convicted on the counts of contempt of Congress. Now he could face, I believe, up to 1 year in prison, very similar to what Steve Bannon has. Bannon's been sentenced to a few months, but has not yet served that sentence because it's pending appeal.
Let's move on now to the world stage. We have a couple of natural disasters in North Africa, starting with a disastrous earthquake in Morocco and a huge flood spawning from a broken dam in Libya that has caused massive amounts of flooding, taking some houses and buildings with it.
Yeah, so Charlie, we're talking here about massive loss of life, right? I mean, what was it in Morocco, Charlie?
I'm not sure, but I know it was not. I believe it was higher than 2,000. I believe.
Yeah, that's a huge number. I mean, this was a bad earthquake. Where obviously our thoughts are with the people suffering in Morocco during this time.
Yes, that number is about to reach 3,000 as well. The current numbers stand at just over 2,900. And just for a little bit of context, this was a magnitude 6.2 earthquake, so that's a big one.
That is a big one. And then, Charlie, more about that flooding in Libya, because I believe also a lot of death there, but also a lot of people unaccounted for.
Yes, this was an absolute disaster. They have found, I believe, at least 2,000 people, and I believe that still over 10,000 are not accounted for. I believe those numbers have now reached over 5,000 dead as the collapsed dam flood worsens. But this is just an absolute disaster for Libya, and we again we hope for a speedy recovery, and we hope that some people who are missing can be found yet again.
Yeah, Charlie, was this flood, was it caused by the dam collapsing, or did the flood cause the dam to collapse, which then made it worse?
It looks like there was already a flood and the dam broke, which made it even worse.
Yeah, so just a disaster there. Obviously, it's gonna take a long time to repair the damage that has come from that. I mean, we are literally talking about homes floating away, right? This has a real impact on a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. Let's move on now to Hurricane Lee, Colin. Can you a little bit more about that?
Yes, this is a hurricane moving through the Atlantic, I believe. I believe it's a magnitude 3 hurricane, Charlie. So this is a big one. We haven't necessarily seen a lot of hurricanes so far.
Colin, I'm pretty sure you mean category. I don't think magnitudes apply to hurricanes.
You're right, sorry. A category 3 hurricane. Yeah, it's moving. And Charlie, it's already been a pretty big hurricane season. We haven't necessarily seen a ton of hurricanes, although there's still plenty of time. But we've seen some pretty big ones. Hurricane Hillary in California, which is surprising. They don't really get hurricanes there. And then, of course, the big one that hit Florida that is people there are still recovering from and will be for probably quite a while.
Yes. The FDA has now approved more COVID boosters. So just a reminder to when that releases, go get your shots and get your flu vaccination as well.
Yeah, and it's big because obviously, Charlie, there's just new variants going around. So I would assume that really for COVID vaccines going forward, it's going to kind of be like the flu vaccine. It'll be different every year. Probably you just go in one day, you get your flu shot, you get your COVID shot, you have a sore arm for a day. That's it. Pretty easy.
Then, Colin, for the last section of our world events, you told me you had a story for me, and you would not actually reveal what this story was, so I'm excited to hear it. So let me hear it.
Yeah, so Charlie, have you ever had the urge to go to London before in your life?
Oh, I've been there before quite a few times.
Yeah, okay. So I assume, Charlie, when you go to London, you take a plane to London, right?
Yes, I don't want to be on a boat for about a few days.
Yeah,
Colin, does this have to do with boats?
Yeah, so Charlie, do you think have you ever felt the urge to take a boat to London?
No,
Maybe
no, I
from
have
Florida.
not.
No?
No.
Okay, well, so if you were going to take a boat from Florida to London, what kind of boat do you think you would take? What are some types of boats that you think would do well on that voyage?
Well, I would imagine larger vessels that are intended to carry hundreds, if not thousands, of people, or like a boat, like such as a cruise ship, but faster. I assume whatever the story is, it has no relation to that kind of boat either.
Yeah, so Charlie, you and all the listeners at home, you might be
Hopefully.
wondering where I'm going with this. And I think that this next question, Charlie, that I have for you might clear some things up. Have you ever felt the urge to travel across the water from Florida to London in a large hamster wheel?
I have not,
You have
but
not?
someone did.
Yeah. So someone did. Little bit of backstory on this guy. Former cyclist, professional cyclist, I believe, lives in Florida. And in, I believe it was 2014, maybe 2016, he created this pretty big hamster wheel that he put in the water and tried to get from Florida to London in. And obviously he failed and he had to be rescued. And then he was told by the Coast Guard basically that if he's going to use it again, he has to tell them that it's going to be used, because obviously it's not safe and there has to be modifications to it. So a couple of years later, he took it out again. And again, predictably, it failed. Then 2021 comes around and he takes it out, Charlie, for a third time. And this one, he gets 25 miles offshore, where he has to turn around because he forgot his GPS.
He tried it again, didn't he?
So back in August, he brought his hamster wheel back out onto the ocean
No.
and tried it again. This time, though,
No.
this time he had the misfortune of doing it in the middle of Hurricane Franklin.
Oh no!
Yeah. And Charlie, you may
is
know some
he
things about
okay?
hurricanes, but it's generally not safe to be out on the water in them.
Doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, so luckily there's no harm. He had to be rescued again. This time, I believe, 70 miles offshore. And this time he was arrested. And he's out on pretty large amount of bail. And he's also not allowed to go in the ocean again, in any context. So, fun little story. One of my favorite stories I've heard recently. We just talked about a bull last week, Charlie, in Nebraska. I think that this story kind of tops that.
Yes.
Yeah, fun stuff.
Fun
All right.
stuff.
All right, so now I think, Charlie, it's time to move on to sports.
All right. Well, week 1 of the NFL. What on earth happened? Well, let's get to it.
It was a wild week.
First of all, Jets, you have an offensive line. Please use it. You can't let your 39-year-old quarterback take 4 snaps and then die.
All right. So, Charlie, we know that you were really rough on Aaron Rodgers last year.
Yes.
So I don't know what you're going to do this year, because he's done for the year. 4 snaps in, 0 completions into his season. An Achilles injury, he's out for the entire season. What do you make of that?
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to laugh at the Jets, who I told you it wouldn't work. I told you at the start of the year it would not work. And
admittedly, for wrong reasons.
Anyway, the Jets completely overpaid for the guy. I told you he wasn't going to be good. He's getting up there in age. And I think that injury might be the end of his career.
Yeah, so I do want to talk about that. Do you expect that he might come back next year? He'll be, I think, 40 next year at the beginning of the season.
He will be 40, 41 on a very damaged Achilles next year. So I just don't see it. But the Jets pulled off a miracle yesterday, walking off the Bills on a punt return after Josh Allen decided that his favorite receiver was going to be on the Jets.
Yeah, so, Charlie, the Jets actually, the thing. I mean, I don't know how good Aaron Rodgers would have been this year, right? 4 snaps is not enough to judge anybody, obviously. But the Jets, besides obviously Rodgers, they looked like a good team, like genuinely a good football team, like a playoff caliber football team.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, obviously it sucks, but losing Rodgers, but Garrett Wilson, I mean, just had a ridiculous catch in the end zone, completely absurd that catch to tie up the game. Bills barely made it to overtime. They clanked one off the field goal off the uprights that barely went in as time expired. So
Yeah, that Jets
lucky
defense,
to make it to overtime.
That Jets defense played a great game. Barely made it to
Yeah,
overtime.
they did.
The Bills,
And
Josh Allen has never won in overtime. Didn't get it done
nope.
again. Let's not overhype the Jets. Let's move on.
I do want to say though, Charlie, Zach Wilson yesterday as we're taping this, he was not great. Definitely not inspiring. He was better than Josh Allen though, and that's not nothing.
No, but do they trust him long term?
It's a good question, because the question is, are they going to look elsewhere for quarterbacks? There's plenty of free agent quarterbacks out there. So do they look elsewhere? Do they stick with him for the rest of the year?
I have heard some rumors swirling around that it is possible that they may try to sign Colin Kaepernick.
That would definitely be interesting. Imagine if Tom Brady came back and played for the Jets, Charlie.
No,
we don't want to start in these rumors.
Don't say it. He's gonna do it. He'll do it.
All right. Yeah. Let's move on to some of the other scores. Charlotte, let's start with that opening kickoff game of the season between the Chiefs, who obviously won the Super Bowl last year, and the Detroit Lions. Lions pulled off the upset. Obviously, the Chiefs down Travis Kelce, who should be back next week, and Chris Jones was holding out. He should also be back in week 2. Did you make of this? Are the Chiefs? How concerning is this for the Chiefs, and how for real are the Lions?
Well, first of all, on the question of the Chiefs, this was a bad game, not a bad sign. This is an opportunity for them to look at what they have. They're fine. It's one bad loss. They lost to the Colts last year.
Fair.
Very early
Fair
in the
enough.
year, and they were fine. This team, they'll get it together. They always do. They'll probably go deep in the playoffs. They'll probably host the AFC Championship game. Will they win? I don't know. The AFC this year is stacked. They may not go anywhere in the playoffs. But all I know is that Patrick Mahomes is going to have another good year. That defense with Chris Jones will step up. And I think this week in Jacksonville is going to be a great game.
Absolutely, it will be. And Charlie, I'd also add on, right, like getting your second and third best players back is not nothing. And also, they win that game if Kadarius Toney has any skills at all.
If any of their receivers.
Yeah, especially him. There was a pick six that Mahomes threw that went through Toney's hands.
Yes, may I add, to Brian Branch, a Lions champion. Now let's get to the Lions. The Detroit Lions are for real. They are going to win that division, and they are a scary team to face in the playoffs. We'll see how far they can go.
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely look legitimate, even if the win maybe has a little bit of an asterisk on it. But like, it's still a big time win. You go into the defending champ's house.
A win's a win, man.
First game of the year. A win's a win, and yeah, no, they look good. They look like a good football team.
You know who did not look like a good football team?
Are you going to say the New York Giants?
I was going to say, well, yes, them, but oh my God, the Seahawks looked awful.
All right, yeah, let's start on that Seahawks game. Pretty high expectations for the Seahawks, Charlie. In our fantasy team draft, you took them as the 10th overall pick. The Rams fell late in that draft. They fell to you at number 19, but it's the Rams that come away with a win there, a big time win. Seahawks were bad the whole game, part of it. Second half, their offensive tackles were injured. We'll see if they play next week, but that's a big loss for them. But the Seahawks defense was a disaster too, Charlie.
Yeah, there was a lot of bad mistakes. A lot of the players who were great last year, especially a lot of the younger guys, did not look very good. Of course, we will get Jamal Adams back, I believe, next week. Looking for another win against those Lions. But yeah, this team is not looking good. It may be time to see if we can steal Caleb Williams from the Cardinals if things keep going like this.
So, obviously, right after the first week of the season, that's when all the overreactions come in, of course. But Charlie, is it an overreaction to say that the Seahawks are in trouble and also that the Rams are good, have like real playoff potential?
No, I would not go that far. The Seahawks had a bad game. There was a dud. I mean, think about last year. We had an awful game against
Fair.
the Falcons. We had an awful game against the 49ers. We lost all 4 of our games to the NFC South
Absolutely. Right. That's
last
that's
year.
bad.
This is a bad loss. The Rams played a good game. They got a lot of production out of their rookies. They still don't have Cooper Kupp back. I think the Seahawks kind of fell asleep in the second half. We'll get back on it. I think Smith had a bad game. He'll get back on it. Our
And Charlie, I
game
also
is
feel like
not
it's
good.
not even fair to judge him because
It's
of the
not
loss
fair
of
to
the
judge
tackles.
either of these teams yet. One had a good week. One had a bad week. We'll see in 6 weeks. 6 weeks from now, who's going to have a good season and who's going to have a bad season. It's really way too early to tell. But a team fell out of the gate last year, fell out of the gate this year. Yikes, the Cincinnati Bengals.
Oof.
But I mean,
Bad
what
loss.
do you expect from them? Joe Burrow was hurt the entirety of training camp and preseason. Comes back, has a bad game against a stingy Browns team, who I think is going to be pretty good this year, actually. I think they are definitely a playoff caliber team from what we've seen so far. Deshaun Watson looks like he's coming back into form finally. That defense looks good. But the Bengals, remember, started bad out of the gate in 2021, made the Super Bowl. Started bad out of the gate last year. The Bengals looked awful in the opener last week. Last year, Burrow had 4 interceptions, and they were one
Yes, he did.
bad call away from making the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Not
But
good. They got lucky that the Steelers lost.
Yeah.
Which is another big. I think they play each other twice, obviously being in the same division. Joe Burrow does not play well against the Browns. This game was in Cleveland, but neither overreactions for both teams. But the Browns looking good so far. Bengals are not. Another team that looked downright awful was the Steelers, who got blown off their own field by the 49ers.
Yeah, just react to first to that Bengals-Browns game real quick. I mean, it's such a stacked division that loss does hurt the Bengals. A huge game coming up for them against the Ravens, and we'll see if there's long-term concerns for that team. I think we'll know more after that Ravens game because they just paid Joe Burrow a lot of money, and he did not look good at all. I mean, we know what he has been, though, and I think it is fair that at some point this season we'll see that again. You just hope that it's not too late. But, yeah, that Steelers game, I expected that the 49ers would win this game by a decent margin, too. The 49ers are a very good team. I don't know if it was just how good the 49ers defense was, Charlie, but the Steelers offense looked bad.
Looked downright awful.
Yeah, and furthermore, Brock Purdy, he is establishing himself as one of the better starters in the National Football League.
He is. Mr. Relevant strikes back yet again.
Yes, he does. Now, Charlie, you ready to talk about that game with the Giants?
Yes, I am. Giants, what are you doing? You lost 40-0. You let Daniel Jones get annihilated in your backfield. Did the Cowboys defense score like 28 points or something?
Not
because it felt like it.
Yeah, Dak was, Charlie, he was not special. He threw for 143 yards the entire game.
The Giants lost to the Cowboys defense and the Cowboys special teams alone.
I've got a quick stat for you, Charlie. So, if you lose 40-0, would you say that that's bad?
Yes, I would say that's pretty awful.
If you lose the sack battle in a single game 7-0, that's bad.
Yes, that would explain why you lost 40-0.
Well, regardless of what happens in that game, if you lose the sack battle 7-0, that seems bad. If in any game you lose the turnover battle 3-0, that seems bad.
You're going to tell me the Giants did all 3, didn't they?
I'm going to go further. If you have a blocked field goal return for a touchdown, you say that that's bad?
Yes, the Giants did all 4, didn't they?
6 in a game. Would you say that that's pretty bad?
Oh, it just gets worse, yes.
No team, Charlie, has ever done all 5 of those things in a single season.
The Giants are going to finish in last place, aren't they?
The Giants did them all in a single game, Charlie.
Oh, my God.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but they were really, really, really bad. And Daniel Jones, I mean, we'll see. Obviously, it's week 1. Not looking like the same guy he was last year, obviously. We're going to have to wait and see. But you really hope, if you're a Giants fan, that last year was not a fluke for him, because that last year was really the only year that he actually gave you anything of value. So, are the Giants in trouble? I mean, it's early, but I'd say yes.
Yes, but certainly we cannot overstate. It is still very, very early in the season. It's like judging baseball teams after the first week and a half.
Sure. Charlie,
If
let's
you
talk about
told
what
me
was.
if you had told me at the end of the first week and a half of the season that the Mariners were going to have a great year, I would say that you're probably wrong. If you're going to say that the Yankees wouldn't be that good, again, I probably would not believe you. But there, lo and behold, here we are.
Exactly. Let's talk about, Charlie, what may have been the best game of the entire week, though. Let's talk about Dolphins and the Chargers, a game with potentially real playoff implications. And it was the Dolphins that came out on top 36-34 in a thriller.
Yeah, again, I don't want to overstate the importance of this being week one, but the Dolphins are scary.
They are. Tua looks good. Very
If
good.
you can stop your quarterback, who's a good quarterback, from getting brain damage on the field every time he drops back, then I think you guys are going to have a great season. And with the Bills kind of starting to falter and the Jets, who don't have Aaron Rodgers, you guys have a great shot at that division.
Absolutely, because the Patriots are oof.
To be fair, the Patriots did look pretty good against the Eagles.
Yeah, that was another interesting game, because the Eagles jumped out to a huge lead. The Patriots, to their credit, they were able to get themselves back in the game. Only lost by 5 at home to a very good team. I drafted them as the top pick in our team draft for a reason.
And we will get to that.
We will get to that.
But the last thing I do want to say is the Patriots, to me, I feel like the Browns, as I said, coming in the season, were a very big mystery, but I feel like we are starting to see just how good they are. The Patriots still very much confuse me. We'll have to wait a few more weeks just to see what this team's true potential is.
Yeah, Charlie, I want to go through a couple of results pretty quickly here. Talk about the Falcons and the Panthers. Falcons, a big win. They look like a good team, albeit against a bad team. What are
your thoughts on Bryce Young?
He wasn't terrible, I don't think.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We have a rookie update as well.
Yeah, but the Falcons look good too. Also, Desmond Ritter's first completed pass of the season. Charlie, do you know who it was to?
Wasn't it to himself?
Yeah, it was to Desmond Ritter. No, it was him. C.J. Stroud, his first career completion. Guess who that was to?
Himself.
C.J. Stroud. Very odd plays in the NFL this week. A couple of other quick results. Jaguars beating the Colts. Charlie, your Jags are off to a great start this year, though. Again,
yes, they are. But I don't like how close that game was.
Yeah, I mean, the Jaguars were losing entering the fourth quarter.
As soon as Trevor Lawrence has a quarterback a coach that is not insane. Sorry, Urban Meyer, but you know I'm not going to apologize to him. But as soon as you get a competent coach with him, he turned into the player that we all thought he could be. He has been great. He was great last year. He'll be great this year. I can't wait to see what this team can do, and I'm very glad that I picked them where I picked them. Last thing I want to state for the actual scores this week is we got a scoregami this week. For those who do not know what that is, it is NFL scores that have never happened before. It's every possible score ever, and when one that has never happened before happens, that's called a scoregami. So the one this week.
Want to give some credit to it?
Yes, the idea was created by John Boyes of SB Nation. I'll give that's the credit. There's a video. I don't know if we want to link that. We can, but anyway. So this week's one was the Titans and Ravens game. Texans and Ravens. The Texans lost that game 25-9. It is very hard to get to 25 given the way to score in the NFL. It's also very weird to get 3 field goals, I believe.
Yeah, definitely weird. Just a couple more scores to go through here. Buccaneers, Charlie, beating the Vikings. The Vikings done. I mean, it's week one, but that's a big oops to lose to this team at home.
Winning 13 games with a negative point differential a year before really revealed how lucky this team got. Yeah, as soon as you have to face teams that are, I wouldn't say as good. The Buccaneers were not expected to be good this year. They're a scrappy team. The Vikings, I think they got very lucky last year, and I think this year could be the very opposite of that. I do not see them finishing with a great record this year.
I'll take my point though. Well, I got it from the Buccaneers. Saints and
You
the
have the
Titans.
Vikings too, I think.
I do. To be fair, Saints and the Titans. Charlie, Titans. Oof. I mean the Saints. We think that the Saints could definitely win that NFC South division, but the Titans, not a game you want to lose, especially
Why
like
would they kick that field goal?
that. Oh boy.
Still confuses
Yeah.
me. Anyway,
Cardinals Commanders.
that was a game. I forgot that was a game this weekend.
We all did because neither of the teams are relevant, so we can move on to Packers Bears. You somewhat surprised that not just that the Packers won, but by just how dominant they were over the Bears. It was a great debut for Jordan Love for the season.
Please don't tell me that Jordan Love is going to play for the Packers and be great for the next 15 years again.
Until he goes to the Jets, and that doesn't go well.
We got to stop them. We got to do something.
Yeah, Bears. It's the same old Bears, Charlie.
I mean, no one expected them to make a huge leap. I understand that they have a lot of draft picks, and that they also have DJ Moore now, obviously, for Fields to throw to. Still a lot of holes in that team. We did not expect them to be good. This is still rebuilding for them. But yes, I'm excited for the future of this team, just not right now.
Sure.
Speaking of the future of the NFL, let's give a little update on some of the rookies around the league. We had three.
Charlie, before we do that, you forgot my favorite game of the week.
Yep.
Hey, Russ. How's it going? How's it going there in Denver with your new coach and losing to the Raiders?
I picked the Broncos, and about 5 seconds later, after we got off our recording, I realized how much of a mistake that was.
You lost to the Raiders. You lost to Jimmy Garoppolo.
Hey, Colin, I have a question
which
for
is
you.
terrible.
Colin, I got a question for you. Do you want the Broncos for like an extra draft so I can get an extra draft pick next year?
The Broncos. I know there is no chance that I want the Broncos on my team. You lost to the Raiders defense. You scored 16 points on the Raiders defense.
Is this continuing the trend where if they scored 18 points, they'd win like almost all of their games?
Yeah, and Russ still can't do it. Now, granted, Russ wasn't terrible. I mean, he had a decent line. Obviously, it hurts to have Jerry Jeudy out, but guys, this is not going well in Denver.
And I don't think Sean can fix this. Sean can't fix this, can he?
And I don't know why we thought he could. It doesn't. And that's not taking anything away from Sean Payton, who I do believe is a very good head coach. It's just not a workable situation when you have this quarterback under contract for the next several years, taking up all of your cap space. That is straight up bad.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of which, let's get to our fantasy teams, I guess, for this week one.
Yeah, you want the standings here? I got them here on the spreadsheet.
Yes, absolutely. But first, let's just say I remember we said last week that we don't know exactly what we will do for the winners and the losers. Well, there's only two of us, but Colin, care to share what we came up with?
Yeah, so whoever loses this, the winner is going to get to make the loser a sandwich with whatever the winner wants on it, and the loser has to eat it, whatever it is.
Yep, this is a bad idea, but we're doing it anyway.
We are definitely doing it anyway.
By the way, Colin, I want to clarify this just because, we probably should. The items on the sandwich have to be edible.
Sure, have to be edible, have to be safe to eat.
Yes, you cannot put like a brick in the sandwich.
Correct. And so let's get to the standings. Charlie jumping off to a small lead, 9-7 so far through one week. It's a point for every game, and then there's also bonus points plus playoff points at the end of the season. You need 157 points to guarantee the win. Charlie, what I found really interesting about this, your top 4 draft picks, 49ers, Jaguars, Ravens, Dolphins, all got your bottom 4, Texans, Panthers, Broncos, Cardinals. None of them got a point. Whereas for me, my top 4...
They're all bad.
Yeah, my top 4, Eagles, Chiefs, Bengals, Lions, 2 points combined. And then the bottom 4 for me, Buccaneers, Packers, Colts, Raiders, 3 points combined.
All right, so Colin, who scored for who this week?
Yeah, so my points came from the Eagles, the Lions, the Jets, the Commanders, the Buccaneers, the Packers, and the Raiders. Yours came from the 49ers, Jaguars, Ravens, Dolphins, Browns, Cowboys, Rams, Saints, and Falcons.
All right, so I lead.
And I think that's enough NFL for this segment.
I think it's interesting, though, that Titans-Saints game, if the Titans weren't stupid, that you would have a lead. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. And let's talk some college football here, Charlie. Week 2 of the college football season. And let's start again with Colorado. And they got another win. Not a great program, but a Power 5 program over Nebraska. Very impressive, Charlie, from Coach Prime's team and from Shedeur Sanders.
Absolutely. And by the way, they have now surpassed their win total from last year.
Yeah. I mean, this team is, for real, it's the most exciting team in the country, partly because of Coach Prime, partly just because they're a very good team right now. Let's talk about the Pac-12 a little bit, Charlie. A whole bunch of wins.
The conference is dying next year, but they ain't done yet.
Ranked teams out of 12. That's like unheard of, basically.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And Charlie, Washington State and Oregon State, those two programs that no conference wanted because they weren't big market enough.
Yep.
So they're playing each other in a couple weeks. And that game will air in primetime Fox channel, not FS1 channel, like one of the bigger rating slots.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
It really is. This conference is stacked from the top to the bottom. So many good teams in it. I mean, they're going to have to start playing each other at some point. And we know that they can have a history of cannibalizing each other. But we'll see. Charlie, the other very interesting result this week had to do with Alabama.
Yep, they lost to Texas.
You surprised by this? Because this was in Tuscaloosa. They haven't lost there in forever.
Yeah, I agree. But I was predicting this. I did not think that Alabama had a solid quarterback situation yet. They did not play to the level that they needed to do to win. Texas is back. I don't like it, but Texas is back.
I mean, maybe better than Alabama.
Yeah.
And Charlie, just a couple more college football scores I want to go over quickly. First, Baylor. You guys. I think you're playing Long Island University. What's happening at Baylor?
Not playing football, apparently.
Yeah. And then finally, I'm giving Clemson some flack on this podcast last week, obviously.
They gave me a heart attack this weekend because I looked at their score. They were down again, and then they just went insane in the second half and won the game anyway. But still,
and they were playing Charleston Southern. It's not like a 66-17 win is that impressive when you're playing Charleston Southern.
A team in the Big South Conference. I don't think you knew that existed, did you?
In basketball, I did, but yeah, football, that's an FCS conference. You almost lost to them. I mean, what are you doing here, guys? Right? Like the score doesn't say that you almost lost, but for a while it looked like that was a very real possibility.
Absolutely. Let's get away from football finally and talk about some basketball. We had the FIBA World Cup, and the U.S. was not in it. They lost to Germany in the semifinals. The final round is between Germany and Serbia. And who won, Colin?
Yeah, Germany came out on top in a pretty good game. But, Charlie, I do really want to talk about that U.S. team because they didn't just lose to Germany. They lost in the bronze medal game to Canada, where Canada's top performer was Dylan Brooks. You allowed Dylan Brooks to carve you guys up.
You let him do it. Oopsie.
Anthony Edwards and Tyrese Halliburton. But even still, the U.S. would be better. And Charlie, I do think that they will be better come the Olympics next year. I think that the stars are going to come out. I think we're going to see the likes of LeBron James play. I think we're going to see Kevin Durant play, Steph Curry play, Devin Booker play, Jason Tatum play, Anthony Davis. The list goes on from there, right? We are going to see the stars come out, and that's going to be a tough team to beat. What do you think about their prospects as they go for gold next summer in the Olympics?
Yeah, I agree, especially with the stars. I think the U.S. certainly has a lot better chance than they did at winning this event here. let's move on to the MLB. The season is really winding down now. We're within 20 games of the end of the year, and some of these pennant races are heating up.
Absolutely, they are. AL West, very interesting still. Mariners, really bad road trip. We'll see if they can maybe get it together. They do have the Dodgers coming up, and then, of course, a huge 10-game stretch at the end of the year. Braves, just about clinched. Dodgers, just about clinched. Or that Orioles race, that could come down to the wire in the AL East too, Charlie, with the Rays closing the gap somewhat. Obviously, those
Absolutely.
wild card races
And by the way,
still wild.
I want to add, by the way, that Atlanta is 2 games away from winning that division already.
Yeah, just incredible stuff
Which
from
is
the
just
Atlanta Braves.
insane.
Charlie, Matt Olson could legitimately hit 60 home runs this year and not win the MVP because he would lose it to his teammate.
It's just the Braves. Can anyone beat them at all?
We'll see come playoff time because that's
this
the only way to go out.
This could be like the 2001 World Series where the Diamondbacks just came out of nowhere.
Absolutely. They've got to be the favorites heading into the postseason.
Absolutely. And I believe the only 2 divisions that we have not checked in on yet are both Central divisions. Milwaukee leads Chicago, the Cubs by 4 games. I don't believe they play each other anymore. That division race could be close. And as for the American League Central, Minnesota leads Cleveland by 7.5 games. That division race is pretty much over.
Yeah, and it's a mid-off, let's be honest, right?
Well, as is the AL West at this point as well.
Sure, fair enough. I do want to talk about just a couple more things before we end this episode. Let's go back to football for just a minute. Let's talk about we talked about Oregon State and Washington State, but let's talk about a lawsuit that they filed, Charlie, against the Pac-12, basically to stop the other schools in the Pac-12 from at their upcoming meeting trying to dissolve the conference and split the money evenly. Because this is apparently something that the Pac-12 schools were actually going to do. It's just corruption at this point.
Yep.
And then the other college football story, Mel Tucker, the coach of Michigan State, he has now been fired after some pretty bad sexual misconduct allegations against him. Now, the university, they've known about this since at least July, did nothing until a report was leaked. Then, of course, they had to fire him. Obviously, Michigan State has had other sexual misconduct scandals. Not a great look on the school, Charlie.
Absolutely not. Let's close out our segment here, sports section, with the WNBA, the U.S. Open, and finally, the closing segment of Formula One.
Yeah, so WNBA season, or regular season, officially over. So we get into the playoffs, which start this week. We're going to be between the Aces and the Chicago of Las Vegas and the Chicago Sky in the 1-8 matchup, New York Liberty and the Washington Mystics. In that 2-7 matchup, the Connecticut Sun, the Minnesota Lynx in the 3-6 matchup, and the 4-5 matchup, the Dallas Wings and the Atlanta Dream. Charlie, the Aces won last year. They've been dominant. They're 34-6 on the season. Can they be beat in the postseason?
Well, we'll see. Over the last few seasons, just generally in sports, the last few years, we've seen a lot of chaos going on. So, who knows?
That's definitely true. As for the bottom 4 teams, Los Angeles Sparks, Indiana Fever, Seattle Storm, Phoenix Mercury, we'll see who gets that number 1 draft pick, which could be really big, Charlie. Remember Caitlin Clark from the NCAA tournament, obviously projected to go number 1 in that draft. That could be a franchise-altering move for whoever gets that pick.
Yes, absolutely. Let's move on to the U.S. Open now. Colin, I'm sure you'd love to talk about that.
Yes, we've got some history, a lot of history. Novak Djokovic, he wins, again, his 24th Grand Slam title and his 4th in New York, the big one over Daniil Medvedev, who he failed to beat in 2021. He won 3 of the 4 slams in 2023, was in the finals in all 4 of them. It took Alcaraz 5 sets to beat him at Wimbledon. Just amazing stuff from Djokovic, who is getting up there in age, but seems to be refusing to call it quits. And then, of course, Coco Gauff on the women's side, the American teenager, a big win over Aryna Sabalenka in that women's final. Just incredible stuff from her. She could definitely be a star for a long time in this sport.
Absolutely. But Colin, really quickly, I wanted to get to a point really quickly before I get to the F1 segment. Last week, when I was talking about Formula One, I was talking about the Italian Grand Prix. You compared Formula One and tennis yet again, and you said that Formula One is boring because the same guy wins every time. And I told you, yes, but doesn't Novak Djokovic win everything? And you said, yeah, well, maybe not this time. Well,
I maintain that if Alcaraz didn't self-implode against Daniil Medvedev, that he probably would have beaten Djokovic. Djokovic, not a ton of success at the U.S. Open.
well,
And
I counter you by saying if Ferrari didn't die repeatedly at every single race last year, then they would have won.
yeah, but the best player in the world didn't even have the number one ranked player in the world in this case didn't even have the chance, Charlie, to play Djokovic in the final. We were robbed of an epic final because of his self-destruction.
All right, anyway, let me get to my F1 update now.
Go
The
ahead.
season is beginning to wind down. Red Bull can win the Constructors' Championship at Singapore if they score a 1-2 finish and get the point for the fastest lap if Mercedes scores only 1 point, or they could get it without that fastest lap if Mercedes fails to score. Singapore is always a bit of a chaotic track, so who knows? There's also some track alterations this year. The final turns underneath the grandstand have been removed and replaced with a straightaway, improving lap speed by between 10 and 13 miles seconds per lap. So, well, good for some racing action. We'll see. This is really looked at as the final chance for some of these other teams to really get at Red Bull. Red Bull does sometimes tend to struggle at this track, but we'll see. This is a endurance race, a setup race. Certainly not a race of speed. This is a slow track. This is one of the slowest overall lap speeds and slowest average lap speeds of the F1 calendar. But yes, Red Bull has this basically locked up as we head into the last part of the year. We have the Las Vegas Grand Prix coming up in October, new race this year, before we head into the 2024 season, where we look to see some actual competition.
Yeah, okay. All right, Charlie. So I'm just looking here at the Formula One standings and looking at Logan Sargent, okay? And the thing is, I have actually done just as well in Formula One as he has this year.
Yes, he's been held scoreless. Admittedly, that Williams has not been the greatest car this year. He has struggled. He has had some opportunities to score. His teammate, Alex Albon, a former Red Bull driver, has done very well in that car, as he did last year. He is a great driver. Sargent has struggled. He's the first American driver in the sport for a long time. I do believe that he might stay. Who knows? Bad season for him. Certainly not the worst rookie on the grid. That goes to Nick DeVries, who was actually replaced mid-season by Daniel Ricciardo before he broke his hand and was replaced by Liam Lawson. So AlphaTauri has kind of had a disastrous season. Anyway, Singapore is this weekend before we move into the final few races of the season in September and October.
Our episodes, Charlie, just seem to be getting longer and longer, but
have we passed an hour yet?
No, we have not.
All right, well, we'll see. We'll get there eventually.
All right, let's close this out. Make sure you subscribe to the C&C Talks podcast. Episodes every single Wednesday, wherever you listen to podcasts. And visit our website, cctalks.net, to learn more about the show. And, of course, call us with your questions at 360-389-2630. And that's 360-389-2630. You could get your question answered on the podcast. And, of course, follow us on Twitter at CC Talks Podcast. And, of course, follow Charlie at CC Talks Charlie. For our producer Morris, production designer Zach, sound designer Drake, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie. See you next week.